all-knowing and perfectly good God almost certainly does not exist. So let me first address why I came to dismiss this Christian scriptures as being a reliable witness to the existence of God. What sort of book would one expect the Bible to be if it were not divinely inspired? We would rightfully expect a collection of writings that serve as a sort of cultural artifact, reflecting the values and critical limitations of its time. We would expect a pre-scientific understanding of nature in the universe, which Phil addressed briefly. Had the creator of the universe guided the biblical authors, we might conversely expect brilliant insight into the mechanics of creation. Unfortunately, that's lacking. If the Bible were not divinely inspired, we would probably expect stories and myths that were adapted and evolved from the myths of the contemporary culture, which we find in the Bible. Without divine guidance, we would not expect the ancient authors to be able to provide wholly accurate historical information. God's not guiding them. Or to be completely free from inconsistencies or contradictions. And if the stories of the Christian God are no more historical than other testimonies of interaction with deities from the same era, then we would probably expect an understanding of morality in the Bible that corresponds with the values of antiquity and is largely irrelevant and outdated for us moderns. And what I would expect to find if the Bible was not inspired by God is exactly what I found the more familiar I became with its text. For example, superstitions are as prevalent in Christian scripture as they were among the pagan contemporaries of the biblical authors. Maybe that's not a big deal to you. That's a big deal to me. For example, we are told of a universal flood. Geologically, we know this doesn't happen, but it's a common myth in antiquity. Diseases and mental illness caused by demons. A talking snake. A talking donkey. Humans living for hundreds of years. A woman being turned into a pillar of salt. The sun standing still in the sky. An axe head floating on water. A star stunning down on one specific tiny building. The spontaneous acquisition of foreign languages. Storms being caused by sin. Long hair as the source of an individual's superhuman strength. And on and on. These stories would be received very skeptically, even by my opponents here tonight, if someone claimed they happened to David, regardless of their worldview. We would require some seriously convincing evidence to demonstrate that nature is no longer working in a natural way. Yet the Bible is full of such unbelievable stories, and it seems strange and perhaps a little too convenient that this God would choose to perform his magic before the scientific age. That he would perform his magic before the printing press, before photographs, before the internet. It seems strange that he would be so concerned with tangibly demonstrating his power and authority to an ancient, superstitious, and largely illiterate people, but leave subsequent generations without a means to verify their testimony. For example, the liberation of the Hebrew slaves from Egypt, as told in Exodus, would have decimated Egyptian society, its agriculture, infrastructure, political leadership, manpower, and and yet we have no archaeological evidence for this mass exodus. The multitude of Egyptian soldiers that were supposedly drowned in the Red Sea, we don't find any chariots or armor at the bottom of the Red Sea. There's no archaeological evidence to support the rapid conquest of Canaan by the Israelites. And what about the life of Jesus? Phil has alluded to some inconsistencies in the Gospels. In Matthew's Gospel, soon after the birth of Jesus, King Herod ordered the mass slaughter of all children 2 years old and younger living in and around Bethlehem. And yet no author, Christian or otherwise, from that time gives this account. This would be a huge deal. And I don't think it's fair to just dismiss this. And there's other things. In Luke's Gospel, at the time of Jesus' birth, Caesar Augustus, whose reign we have pretty good records on, supposedly ordered, according to Luke, a census to be taken of all the inhabitants of the Roman Empire, and that everyone who had to register had to return to the home of their ancestors. Think of the massive bureaucratic feat that would entail. Never mind how they would even accomplish it. But yet again, no Christian or pagan or contemporary authors reference this, only Luke. Luke also claims that this census took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. But as New Testament scholar Bart Ehrman points out, if Matthew is right that Jesus was born during Herod's reign, then Luke cannot also be right that it happened when Quirinius was governor of Syria. We know from a range of other historical sources, including the Roman historian Tacitus, the Jewish historian Josephus, and several ancient inscriptions, that Quirinius did not become governor of Syria until 10 years after Herod's death. Maybe that's not a big deal for you either. The Bible also presents a morality that is at best irrelevant to our needs today and at worst threatens the values that most of us hold dear. The God of the Bible ordered a society that makes the Taliban look moderate. This God commanded, and I can give you the references later, I don't have time. This God commanded that the death penalty be the consequence for picking up sticks on the Sabbath, for disrespecting one's parents, for simply worshiping another deity. And we don't like the Taliban. This God also instructs his followers that if a man rapes a virgin who is pledged to be married, the rape victim herself must be stoned to death. And I'll give you the reference real quick. Deuteronomy 22, verses 23 and 24. That's disgusting. The barbarism goes on, and I've had to cut out a lot of my references. So for me, the Bible is what I would exactly expect from antiquity. It does not provide a reliable guide to what God is like and what his plans are, if indeed a God exists. But the problem of suffering was for me just as important in deconstructing my faith in the existence of the Christian God. This problem was stated by David Hume in the following way. Is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he is impotent. Is he able to prevent evil, but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then where does all the evil come from? The God of the Bible is portrayed as frequently intervening in nature and the affairs of humans in order to execute his purposes. This God is said to have miraculously freed the Israelites from slavery, going so far as to kill all the firstborn sons of Egypt in order to do so. And yet he did nothing for the African Americans who were enslaved in the American South. We had to do something about that. The Red Sea was supposedly supernaturally parted to allow the Hebrew slaves safe passage out of Egypt. And yet the waters of the 2004 tsunami were allowed to effortlessly kill 1 million Indonesians. 250,000. When it suited this God's whims, their God's whims, he provided food from heaven and was able to multiply a basket of bread and fish to feed multitudes. Yet how many people die today from starvation and hunger? The Christian God added 15 years to King Hezekiah's life, but is apparently unmoved by the untimely deaths of all these children with cancers that filled up the cancer wards in our hospitals in every city. The Christian God restored sanity to the tormented King Nebuchadnezzar, but apparently it would not bring this God glory to do the same for those suffering from mental illness today. And as someone who has worked with people with mental illness and developmental disabilities, that's a shame and it's disgusting if this God exists. Jesus and his apostles could apparently heal with a touch, a word, or even their shadows, and yet the AIDS pandemic continues to rack the already poor and suffering in Africa today. So perhaps a God or gods do exist. Perhaps, I could be wrong. There could be some gods out there. But due to the unreliability of the Bible, it seems unlikely to me that the Christian God, which is defined by the Bible, exists at all. And surely a benevolent and all-powerful God does not exist in light of the overwhelming and gratuitous suffering in our world today.
Thank you. Finishing right on time. The first cross-examination in the affirmative, excuse me, is 8 minutes. Gentlemen, you have just a few seconds, about 15 seconds while I change the time here. Okay, if you'll please stop when I call time. Time starts now. All right.
Okay, thanks for your presentation. We're going to start with some questions. We're going to alternate. You can answer how you want. Would it be possible for the Christian God to communicate some things to us in such a way that we could know them for certain? Would that be possible?
As certain as we know it.
So if the Christian God exists, he could reveal things to us such that we know them for certain.
He could reveal things to us, but he could also.
Yeah, no, but that's the only question.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right, how is it possible for you as atheists to know anything for certain?
I would state that, you use the original argument, the ether ergo sum, but you're going to say that begs the question, right?
Right.
Right, well then, Kierkegaard came up with the next argument. X thinks I am that X, therefore I think, therefore I am. It takes the begging the question away from the argument. Would you disagree with that? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I've never heard of Kierkegaard's response to that, so
Oh,
I
okay.
can't reply to it that way.
Okay.
So you can know that you exist?
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you know you're here?
I just stated it. I mean,
Right.
Should I say it again?
Yes, please.
Okay. X thing.